Hello, and welcome to a new episode of NSPE's Committee Corner. I'm your host, Margaret Edwards, and this week we are joined by NSPE President-Elect Britt Smith for a conversation about preparing for worsening natural disasters and the role of the professional engineer. We're going to look at this topic through a recent hearing held up on Capitol Hill about worsening natural disasters and how to kind of prepare for those. So to start off, let's talk about the committee itself. So the Senate Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee. It's a new committee here in the committee corner. And so just want to run through a few fast facts about the committee. So the Committee on Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs is the chief oversight committee of the U.S. Senate. It was formerly known as the Committee on Governmental Affairs. And then in 2003, it took on primary oversight responsibility for the Department of Homeland Security. Thus leading to the name change. The committee is under the leadership of Senator Gary Peters of Michigan and Senator Rob Portman of Ohio. Also, since Britt is here, it would be a missed opportunity to not mention that one of his senators, Senator Josh Hawley from Missouri, also serves on this committee. The subcommittee has the committee itself has three subcommittees. It has the Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations, the Subcommittee on Emerging Threats and Spending Oversight, and the Subcommittee on Government Operations and Border Management. And one part of the committee's jurisdiction that I think is important to note and essential to kind of why we're going to be talking about natural disaster preparedness is that the committee is responsible for studying the intergovernmental relationships between the U.S. and states and municipalities. Of course, natural disaster management does not happen in a vacuum. It happens within the larger kind of governmental ecosystem between the federal government, state governments, and local governments. So that's kind of an excellent opportunity for the committee to address the topic that they did during this hearing. So the hearing happened at the end of September, which of course is National Preparedness Month. So something I didn't know, but learned whenever I watched it. And the goal of the hearing was to have an overarching conversation about the need to address worsening natural disasters, as well as hear from the panelists about gaps they might be seeing and solutions to address those. The panelists that did attend the hearing are present on the screen, who I think represent a wide variety of the disaster preparedness and mitigation space and response space. And so I think Senator Peters really summed up the goal of this hearing very well in his opening statement. He said that I appreciate our witnesses for joining us today and look forward to discussing these issues and other efforts that will help us strengthen our disaster preparedness and response efforts across the country. And I think to offering solutions from some of the panelists, we did hear from Jerry Hancock, and he's really in the flood management space. He identified multiple existing and new funding opportunities to assist with helping communities prepare for worsening floods. So bringing these experts in disaster preparedness and disaster response, bringing them before the committee was a great opportunity to have this conversation up on Capitol Hill. So now that we kind of, the stage is set, in the conversation that's happening, here in Washington, D.C., let's kind of pivot to a larger conversation with, 2021-22 NSPE President-Elect Britt Smith. Kind of on this topic and the PE's role in it. So Britt, thank you so much for joining us here today on the Committee Corner.
Great, glad to be here and really looking forward to our conversation.
Wonderful. So let's just kind of dive right into some questions that we've prepared kind of to shape the conversation that we're here to have today. So looking at this topic of preparing for natural disasters, like in your day-to-day work as a professional engineer, like what are considerations that you're making to protect the public from future natural disasters?
Well, yeah, early, well, first off, I'm a civil engineer working in a small municipality in Missouri. And, but early in my career, when I was a consultant, I was involved in, it was a tragic accident where a young man drowned at a low water crossing. The low water crossing was designed such that there was a pipe big enough for him to be brought into that pipe, and unfortunately, tragically lost his life. The county hired my firm and were involved. We very quickly changed the design of that low water crossing to a low water bridge, which was much safer, flowed water better, improved access in the area. But that's what, at that point, is when I realized that we weren't in the building bridges business. We're not in the building roads business. We were in the serving and protecting of the public business. And that's really what preparing for natural disaster is really all about.
I think that's a fantastic answer, especially in kind of shaping how you do approach your work. Definitely in the more business of people rather than the business of things.
And that's exactly right. We've got to remember that the stereotypical geek sitting in in their cubicle crunching numbers. The numbers really don't matter. It's the people that matter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think that's definitely, whenever we talk about professional engineers, protecting the public health, safety, and welfare, I think that, definitely is a great mindset to have. So kind of moving on to the next question that I have for you, how can, planning or building for the future with resilience in mind, provide a long-term benefit to the public, since we are, since, you as engineers are really, in the business of people with that kind of outlook, especially as we're, encountering worsening natural disasters.
And yes, we definitely are occurring, or at least in my experience, I'm seeing much more frequent natural disasters. Maybe is a big term, but certainly higher frequency rain, et cetera, et cetera. So we as engineers have to begin to have a mind shift change that, planning for that worst case scenario, sometimes we need to really think hard. What is that worst case? What, how far, should we be thinking this ahead? Whenever, for instance, if you're designing a storm culvert system, plan for when that culvert's going to clog and what's going to happen. Those types of things, it's just all part of the good design process. It is what we're trained to do. And that's what makes our job, exciting, but also so very, very important. If we can continue to look for what we believe is that worst case scenario and truly think about it, is there something that we are not considering, and really put our mindset to that and then plan for it, we're all going to be better off in the long run.
Yeah, I think that's great. My last question, you were kind of looking forward, but kind of, taking a step back and looking, kind of to the past, like, are there any times in your career that, show the downside or negative effects of not building for the future? Or has anything happened that, has solidified, the idea in your mind that we as a society, do need to be building for the future, or making considerations for, whether it's increasing frequency or increasing just the effect of natural disasters?
Well, great question. I work for a small city. We're about to celebrate our 200th anniversary of our founding. And so over the 200 years, there's been a lot of decisions made, both good and bad. They're saying that we stand on the shoulders of those that came before us. We also inherited what they gave us. In many cases, they didn't have all the facts. They didn't understand what was going to happen. They may not understood that subdivision would be standing 200 years later. So, we do have a lot of things that we have to make up for. Even in the urban renewal of the 1970s, a lot of things got, concrete. It was thought it would make good sense to concrete this urban channel such that we could flow that water faster. But eventually that water gets to the bottom of the hill, and somebody is at the bottom of that hill. In my career, I started my career in the early 90s. One of the first things I remember was dealing with is the historic flooding of 1993 that struck the Midwest in the Missouri and the Mississippi Valley. huge flooding, historic levels exceeded the 100-year. I believe it's not quite 500-year, but in that range. I've seen multiple snowstorms in 20+ inches and more, ice storms over multiple days, and then most recently, we dealt with, in my small community, another not as high as 93, but large river flood, and at the same time the community was struck by an EF3 tornado in the same week, actually the same day. Combine that with rain events that have been microbursts that have exceeded, one of them exceeded the 1,000-year return period. So obviously, at least from my perspective, I can see that things are worsening and getting more intense and more frequent. So we have to be thinking about it. I remember having a conversation with a farmer early in my career saying we were designing this to the 100-year flood level, which is, in my young, naive way, I told him, you'll probably never see this event happen. Well, it's probably happened 5 or 6 times since I built that box. So we have to recognize that the 100-year storm is really a 1% chance, and there's a 1% chance every time it rains. So that's just one aspect of this. And so, we as engineers are on that front line. We're the ones that have got to figure out this problem.
Yeah. Excuse me. Yeah, I think that's great. And I think definitely kind of looking to the past, I think in anything is always, kind of great in helping us shape how we, do move forward, and, definitely learning from the past, whether, good and bad from the past, I think is, just, I think a valuable lesson in any regard. So, excuse me. So my next question is, what are some actions like you're taking in your day-to-day work as an engineer to build for the future or address, future threats of natural disasters?
Well, we as engineers do a lot of things every day. And, of course, I have to speak from my own perspective as a municipal engineer. And, me along with, thousands of other engineers across the country, deal with these issues every day. So we're constantly, looking for a revised flood code as an example. The flood levels, we need to increase our models. The technology has gone by leaps and bounds and we can better predict what the flood levels will be given a given rain event. Better in building codes to protect the folks, in those homes and businesses. Whether it be the level that they build or the strength of that roof connection as an example, just a myriad of issues. And then, we need to work with nature as opposed to try to fight nature, figure out where we should be building and where we shouldn't be. And sometimes the shouldn't be is more important than where we should, and figure out where the economics of that decision meet the reality of the situations that we're in, and find that right balance.
I think that's a great answer. I think kind of, taking a step, back, looking at, the resilience and sustainability space on a much broader level. Do you are there challenges within that, sustainability and resilience space, and, ways to address them that, we as a society, or, that even the engineering community should be looking forward to happen, or, that you're, particularly interested to see happen, and kind of tacking onto that, are there, any places that a PE's expertise will be especially needed, kind of moving forward to address,
Right.
Sustainability or resilience issues?
Yeah, we have to be on the front line of that discussion. We as engineers have the training, we have the experience, we have the abilities to be in that front line. Some of the areas, just reading this morning in a news report about, the greenhouse gas production across the world in different countries, what we're doing. We've made great strides in the US, but we're still second, in the world. But we also have to figure out ways that we can continue to reduce that and or deal with what we are producing. And so energy production, I think, is a huge area where engineers need to be looking at, can we imagine this better? Can we find ways to do this better? And the other one is, we just have to be good stewards of the resources that we're given. Our highest calling is to protect the public's health, safety, and welfare. And we can't do that without the natural resources. So it's integral to that highest calling to not only protect people, but we have to protect the resources that protect the people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. And I think this next question kind of, lends itself, is going in the direction that you're kind of just going, but, we are the National Society of Professional Engineers. So why do we need professional engineers involved in sustainability resilience work?
Sometimes I think we forget about this. We are trained problem solvers. That's what we do. That's what the engineering process that we began to be taught when we were probably even in junior high and high school, and continued through college and continued into the career. We figure out, we see a problem, identify the problem, and then find the solution. Mm-hmm. and then compare that solution that we come up with is it effective? And so that's why we have to be there. We have to be involved. It is how we serve society. If we can, if engineers can figure out how to put people on the moon, we can figure out this problem. It's just like any other. All we have to do is decide to do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think it wasn't something you said just now, but just a little bit ago, you used the word imagine. And I think that's, like there is such, and this is me speaking as somebody who's not an engineer, I think such creativity in engineering and like the problem solving that engineers do take to addressing certain things. And it's such like a special type of creativity and imagination that engineers do bring to the table. And I think such a valuable piece to the conversation that sometimes, particularly in the policy conversation is missing sometimes.
I think every engineer's probably had the same experience, that you're sitting there working at a problem and you have that aha moment. Mm-hmm. Where suddenly you think differently. Suddenly something becomes clear. And then later you're looking back and going, that was so easy. Why didn't I think about that to begin with? That's it. It's the imagination. It is the design process, and it just needs to be applied. And that's the reality.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic. And so the final question I have for you today, Britt, as a professional engineer, and since we're on the community corner, we're looking at Congress and the conversations that they're having around these issues. Like, what is your message to policymakers as they work on policy around natural disaster preparedness, or even just sustainability and resilience, and kind of environmental policies in general?
Yeah, well, first and foremost, I would ask them to listen to the experts. Listen to the people that know. They're not always going to agree, but if you take all that input and listen to it. And then I recently heard what I think is the best definition of resiliency I had ever heard. I wish I had made this up, but I didn't. Resiliency is how fast that the affected people get back to the new normal. And notice I say new normal, mm-hmm. because if it is something that affects their life, it doesn't go back to normal. It can't, because if it's that impactful, there's going to be a new normal. And then the other part of resiliency is the new normal should be better than the way it was. That's what I'd ask lawmakers to envision. Mm-hmm. Recovery shouldn't be about just putting back what was there. It should be looking to the future and figuring out what should be there. what is the right thing? And again, it is about imagination. I mean, I love that word. You know, it is about imagining how it can be better.
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic note to end our conversation today on, Britt. So thank you so much for joining the committee corner, for having this really important conversation today. So thank you.
I am glad to do it and really enjoyed it. Thanks, Margaret.
Yeah, thanks, Britt. So with that concludes this episode of Committee Corner. So please be sure to tune in next time. And you can find the Committee Corner in the NSPE Advocacy Center or on the NSPE YouTube page. Thank you.